The first book of Samuel. What was said of the book of Judges is also largely true of the first book of Samuel, save that the narratives of what it is composed, probably originally put together even a little earlier than the book of Judges, dealt with events nearer to the writer's own time, that their imagination was a trifle more limited by actuality. The theme of the work is twofold. First, the conflict between the older semi-republican government of the judges represented by Samuel and the rising monarchical party led by Saul. And second, after the monarchy is established, the successful rebellion of David against it, looking back upon these struggles from the point of view of the latter kingdom, when David was accepted as the national hero, and when there was at the same time a tendency to glorify the older past, the writer's attitude was, on the whole, decidedly unfavorable to the transitional figure of Saul, although stories emanating from his followers and contradictory of the Samuel-David version were also incorporated in the record. The work was subjected to Deuteronomic revision during the exile, but as the editors were interested in historical facts not for their own sake, but as illustrations of religious principles, they did not trouble to iron out these minor discrepancies. The birth of Samuel. Now, there was a certain man of Ramathaim, Zophim. I don't know if that's a TZ, and I don't know if that's just a plain T, but of Mount Ephraim, and his name was Elkanah, the son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Zuph, and Ephrathite. And he had 2 wives, and the name of the one was Hannah, and the name of the other Peninnah. And Peninnah had children, but Hannah had no children. And this man went up out of his city yearly to worship and to sacrifice unto God as a noun and verb of host, so that would be Yahweh Tzbaot, right? In Shiloh. And the 2 sons of Eli, Hophni, and Phinehas, the priest of God as noun and verb, were there. And the time was that Elkanah offered. He gave to Peninnah his wife, and to all her sons and her daughters portions, but unto Hannah he gave a worthy portion, for he loved Hannah. But God as noun and verb had shut up her womb, and her adversary also provoked her sore, for to make her fret, because God as a noun and verb had shut up her womb. And as he did so year by year, when she went up to the house of God as a noun and verb, so she provoked her. Therefore she wept and did not eat. Then said Elkanah, her husband, to her, Hannah, why weepest thou? And why eatest thou not? And why is thy heart grieved? Am I not better to thee than 10 sons? So Hannah rose up, after they had eaten in Shiloh, and after they had drunk. Now Eli the priest sat upon a seat by a post of the temple of God as a noun and verb, and she was in bitterness of soul, and prayed unto God as a noun and verb, and wept sore. And she vowed a vow, and they said, O God as a noun and verb of host, if thou wilt indeed look on the affliction of thine handmaid, and remember me, and not forget thine handmaid, but wilt give unto thine handmaid a man-child, then I will give him unto God as a noun and verb all the days of his life, and there shall be no razor come upon his head. And it came to pass, as she continued praying before God as a noun and verb, that Eli marked her mouth. Now Hannah, she spoke in her heart, only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. Therefore Eli thought she had been drunken. And Eli said unto her, How long wilt thou be drunken? Put away thy wine from thee. And Hannah answered and said, No, my lord, I am a woman of a sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but have pouted out my soul before God as noun and verb. Count not thine handmaid for a daughter of Belial. For out of the abundance of my complaint and grief have I spoken hitherto. Then Eli answered and said, Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant thee thy petition that thou hast asked of him. Nowadays we have the same sort of problem, is that you say God, people really don't know what you mean. And saying Lord, instead of saying God as noun and verb, increasing existence, established, establishing, a lot of people are going to think it's talking about Jesus or something, or maybe some lowercase Lord, letter L, Lord, or even uppercase letter Lord, as in, this is their position, the Lord and Lady of this valley or place or whatever. So you need to be specific sometimes what you mean by God. Who? And she said, Let thine handmaid find grace in thy sight. I'm getting a rumbling the tumbly. I don't know if you can hear that, but sorry about that. Because I didn't eat before this. And she said, Let thine handmaid find grace in thy sight. So the woman went her way, and did eat, and her countenance was no more sad. And they rose up in the morning early, and worshipped before God as noun and verb, and returned and came to their house in Ramah, and Elkanah knew Hannah his wife, and God as noun and verb remembered her. Wherefore it came to pass, when the time was come about after Hannah had conceived. I think that's what the Chana, or Hannah, something, that she had borne a son, and called his name Samuel, saying, Because I have asked him of God as noun and verb. And the man Elkanah and all his house went up to offer unto God as noun and verb the yearly sacrifice and his vow, but Hannah went not up, for she said unto her husband, I will not go up until the child be weaned, and then I will bring him, that he may appear before God as noun and verb, and there abide forever. And Elkanah her husband said unto her, Do what seemeth thee good, tarry until thou have weaned him, for only God as noun and verb establish his word. See that last part, the wah, in the tetragrammaton, ever establishing. So the woman abode and gave her son suck until she weaned, breastfeed him. And when she had weaned him, she took him up with her, and with 3 bullocks, and 1 ephah of flour, and a bottle of wine. I think that actually might include the press of any juice too, and brought him to the house of God as noun and verb in Shiloh. And the child was young. Yeah, you don't get little kids drunk, even if you are their parents. And they slew a bullock, and brought the child to Eli. And she said, O my Lord, as thy soul liveth, my Lord, I am the woman that stood by thee here, praying unto God as a noun and verb. For this child I have prayed, and God, as a noun and verb, hath given me this petition, which I asked of him. Therefore also I have lent him to God as a noun and verb. So long as he liveth, he shall be lent to God as noun and verb. And he worshipped God as noun and verb there. Hannah's thanksgiving. And Hannah prayed and said, My heart rejoiceth in God as noun and verb. Mine horn is exalted in God, and it's the noun and verb. My mouth is enlarged over mine enemies, because I rejoice in thy salvation. There is none holy as God is the noun and verb, for there is none beside thee, neither is there any rock like our God. Talk no more. Our God is Elhi, maybe in this passage. Talk no more, so exceedingly proud. Let not arrogancy come out of your mouth. For God is a noun and verb, is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. And bows of the mighty men are broken, and they that stumbled are girded with strength, that they were full have hired out themselves for bread, and they that were hungry ceased, so that the barren hath borne 7, and she hath many children, is waxed feeble. God is a noun and verb, killeth and maketh alive. And he bringeth down to the grave and bringeth up. God is a noun and verb, maketh poor and maketh rich. He bringeth low and lifteth up. He raiseth up the poor out of the dust, and lifteth up the beggar from the dunghill, to set them among the princes, and to make them inherit the throne of glory. For the pillars of the earth are God's noun and verbs, and he hath set the world upon them. He will keep the feet of his saints, and the wicked shall be silent in darkness. For by strength shall no man prevail. The adversaries of God as a noun and verb shall be broken to pieces. Out of heaven shall he thunder upon them. God as a noun and verb shall judge the ends of the earth, and he shall give strength unto his king, and exalt the horn of his anointed. Excuse me. Now the sons of Eli were the sons of Belial. They knew not God as noun and verb, and the priest's custom with the people was that when any man offered sacrifice, the priest's servant came, while the flesh was in seething, with a flesh hook of 3 teeth in his hand, and he struck it into the pan, or kettle, or cauldron, or pot. All that the flesh hook brought up, the priest took for himself. So they did in Shiloh unto all the Israelites that came thither. Also before they burned the fat, the priest's servant came and said to the man that sacrificed, Give flesh to roast for the priest, for he will not have sodden flesh of thee, but raw. And if any man said unto him, Let them not fail to burn the fat presently, then take as much as thy soul desireth. Then he would answer him, Nay, but thou shalt give it me now, and if not, I will take it by force. Wherefore the sin of the young men was very great before God as a noun and verb, for men abhorred the offering of God as a noun and verb. But Samuel ministered before God as a noun and verb, being a child girded with a linen ephod. Moreover, his mother made him a little coat and brought it to him from year to year, when she came up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. And Eli blessed Elkanah and his wife, and said, God as a noun and verb, give the seed of this woman for the loan which is lent to God as a noun and verb. And they went unto their own home, and God as a noun and verb visited Hannah, so that she conceived, and bore 3 sons and 2 daughters, and the child Samuel grew before God as a noun and verb. Now Eli was very old, and heard all that his sons did unto all Israel, and how they lay with the woman that assembled at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And he said unto them, nowadays there's actually instances of prostitutes that go and work rabbi conventions, although not all of these ones are, open to the presence. I know who you are, that, maybe would have security or police kind of direct these people away. Why do ye such things? For I hear of your evil dealings by all the people. Nay, my sons, for it is no good report that I hear ye make God as a noun and verbs people to transgress. If one man sin against another, the judge shall judge him. But if a man sin against God as a noun and verb, who shall entreat for him? Notwithstanding, they hearken not unto the voice of their father, because God as a noun and verb would slay them. And the child Samuel grew on, and was in favor both with God as a noun and verb, and also with men. And the child Samuel ministered unto God as a noun and verb before Eli. And the word of God as a noun and verb was precious in those days. There was no open vision. And it came to pass at that time, when Eli was laid down in his place, and his eyes began to wax dim, that he could not see, and ere the lamp of God went out in the temple of God as a noun and verb, where the ark of God was, and Samuel laid down to sleep, and God as a noun and verb called Samuel, and he answered, Here am I. And he ran unto Eli, and said, Here am I, for thou callest me. And he said, I called not. Lie down again. And he went and lay down. And God as a noun and verb called yet again, Samuel. And Samuel arose and went to Eli and said, Here I am, for thou didst call me. And he answered, I called thee not, my son, lie down again. And the Lord called Samuel again the third time. And he arose and went to Eli, and said, Here am I, for thou didst call me. And Eli perceived that God as a noun and verb called the child. Therefore Eli said unto Samuel, Go lie down, and it shall be, if he call thee, that thou shalt say, Speak, Lord. Did he say the tetragrammaton here? That would make sense in this case. But for thy servant heareth. So Samuel went and lay down in his place, and God as a noun and verb came and stood and called, as at other times, Samuel, Samuel. Situated? Would that be a better translation of that? But we understand the language. It doesn't mean that God, incarnated in the room and sat at the foot of the bed or something. But, and then Samuel answered, Speak, for thy servant heareth. And God as a noun and verb said to Samuel, Behold, I will do a thing in Israel, at which both the ears of every one that heareth it shall tingle. In that day I will perform against Eli all things which I have spoken concerning his house. When I begin, I will also make an end. For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knoweth, because his sons made themselves vile, and he restrained them not. And therefore I have sworn unto the house of Eli, that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be purged with sacrifice nor offering forever. Well, true repentance more than the means, right? And Samuel lay until the morning, and opened the doors of the house of God as a noun and verb, and Samuel feared to show Eli the vision. Then Eli called to Samuel, and said, Samuel, my son. And he answered, Here am I. He said, What is the thing which the Lord hath said unto thee? I pray thee, hide it not from me. God do so to thee. And more also, if thou hide anything from me of all the things that he said unto thee. And Samuel told him every whit, and hid nothing from him. And he said, It is God as a noun and verb, let him do what seemeth him good. And Samuel grew, and God as a noun and verb with him, and did let none of his words fall to the ground. And all Israel, from Dan even to Beersheba, I'm not sure if that's the right pronunciation, but knew that Samuel was established to be a prophet of God as noun and verb. The loss of the ark. Now, if there was a priestly book, I guess, like unto the Bible for the community of Muhammad, then you'd probably have the Karamites, or however you pronounce that in the original language, taking of the Kaaba stone, and well, the pilgrimage still was exactly the same. The prayer was the same. I mean, no one could touch the stone, but that was always an elective, anyways. So in a way, it's that sort of story. In a lot of ways, it's not. But it would take this sort of place in a Bible of the post Muhammad community. Now Israel went out against the Philistines to battle, and pitched beside Eben Ezer, and the Philistines pitched in Aphek, and the Philistines put themselves in array against Israel, and when they joined battle, Israel was smitten before the Philistines, and they slew of the army in the field about 4,000 men. And when the people were come into the camp, the elders of Israel said, Wherefore hath God as noun and verb smitten us today before the Philistines? Let us fetch the ark of the covenant before the Lord out of Shiloh unto us, that, when it cometh among us, it may save us out of the hand of our enemies. So the people sent to Shiloh, that they might bring from thence the ark of the covenant of the Lord of hosts. Not really Lord, but Yahweh Tzbot, which dwelleth between the cherubims, worshipping beings or something like that, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, which were there with the ark of the covenant of God. And when the ark of the covenant of God as a noun and verb came into the camp, all Israel shouted with a great shout, so that the earth rang again. Are they saying God in the place of Elohim, divinity? When the ark of the covenant, God as a noun and verb, came into the camp, all Israel shouted with a great shout, so that the earth rang again. And when the Philistines heard the noise of the shout, they said, What meaneth the noise of this great shout in the camp of the Hebrews? And they understood that the ark of God as noun and verb was come into the camp. The Philistines were afraid, for they said, God is come into the camp. And they said, Woe unto us, for there hath not been such a thing heretofore. Woe unto us! Who shall deliver us out of the hand of these mighty entities that people consider to be gods? These are the entities that, these are the powers that smote the Egyptians with all the plagues in the wilderness. Be strong and quit yourselves like men, O ye Philistines, that ye be not servants unto the Hebrews, that they have been to you. Quit yourselves like men and fight. Philistines is kind of like a linguistic twist, is why they're not so historical. But if you look at this and, if you play word games, you kind of end up with similar. And the Philistines fought, because they're calling them wallowers for the female Satan. And the Philistines fought, and Israel was smitten, and they fled, every man unto his tent, and there was a great slaughter, for there fell of Israel 30,000 footmen, and the ark of God was taken, and the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, were slain, and there ran a man, a Benjamin, out of the army, and came to Shiloh the same day with his clothes rent, and with earth upon his head. And when he came, lo, Eli sat upon a seat by the wayside watching, for his heart trembled for the ark of God. And when the man came into the city and told it, all the city cried out. And when Eli heard the noise of the crying, he said, What meaneth the noise of this tumult? Now Eli was 98 years old, and his eyes were dim, so that he could not see. And the man said unto Eli, I am he that came out of the army, and I fled today out of the army. And he said, What is there done, my son? And the messenger answered and said, Israel is fled before the Philistines, and there hath been also a great slaughter among the people. And thy two sons also, Hophni and the Nahas are dead, and the ark of God is taken. And it came to pass, when he made mention of the ark of God, that he fell from off the seat backward by the side of the gate, and his neck broke, and he died. For he was an old man and heavy. Well, anyone can die from a fall like that breaks your neck. And he had judged Israel 40 years. And his daughter-in-law, the Nahas, his wife, was with child, near to be delivered. And when she heard the tidings that the ark of God was taken, and that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, and she bowed herself and travailed, for her pains came upon her. And about the time of her death, the woman that stood by her said unto her, Fear not, for thou hast borne a son. And she answered not, neither did she regard it. And she named the child Ichabod. I don't know how that renders. Is she bad, or I don't know whether the O is even a marker. Saying, the glory is departed from Israel, because the ark of God as a noun and verb was taken, because her father-in-law and her husband, and she said, the glory is departed from Israel, for the ark of God is taken. Well, that's not a feminine voice, but you know what I mean. The anointing of Saul, by anointing, making a Messiah. Messiah is, a lot of messiahs in the Bible. And Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life, and he went from year to year in circuit to Bethel and Gilgal and Mizpah, which is a name I should have looked up before continuing this, shouldn't I have? And judged Israel in all those places. And his return was to Ramah, for there was in his house, and there he judged Israel. And there he built an altar unto God as a noun and verb. And it came to pass, when Samuel was old, that he made his sons judges over Israel. Now the name of the firstborn was Ual. Is it Ual? And the name of his second, I don't know what Joel renders as, and the name of his second, Abiah. They were judges in Beersheba, and his sons walked not in his ways, but turned aside after lucre, and took bribes, and perverted judgment. Lucre as in the shiny things. Silver, gold, jewels, whatever that. And perverted judgment. Then all the leaders of Israel gathered themselves together, and came unto Samuel, unto Ramah, and he said unto him, Behold, thou art old, and thy sons walk not in thy ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. But the thing displeased Samuel when he said, Give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed unto God as a noun and verb. And God as a noun and verb said unto Samuel, Hearken unto the voice of the people, and all that they say unto thee. For they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them, according to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them up one out of Egypt, even to this day, wherewith they have forsaken me and served other gods, so did they also unto thee. Now therefore hearken unto their voice, howbeit ye protest solemnly unto them, and show them the manner of the king that shall reign over them. And Samuel told all the words of the Lord of God as a noun and verb unto the people that asked of him a king. And he said, This will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you, and he will take your sons and appoint them for himself, for his chariots, to be his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots. And he will appoint him captains over thousands and captains over 50s, and will set them to ear his ground and to reap his harvest, and to make his instruments of war and instruments of his chariots. And he will take your daughters to be confectioners, and be cooks, and to be bakers. Hence the myth of the Jewish baker.